Dentistry in General Radio Network presents
DIG's official podcast with Dr. Bob D.
This podcast is sponsored by Dig-a-Palooza, the continuing education event where clinical excellence meets community. Early bird tickets available now at dentistryingeneral.com. In this episode,
tell me what you think as far as the future of dentistry goes.
Don't let anyone fear mongering. DSOs, they're not taking it. This is such a nuanced business. There's a reason why we haven't been consolidated already. Why more than half of optometrists are consolidated, because that's a more predictable profession. We always joke in school about how you give 10 dentists a patient, you'll get 12 different treatment plans, right? There's no way you can institutionalize our expertise to that degree. You have to rely on the individual provider. And what I've found is if I invest in the provider, I have a more predictable outcome than if I invested in the market. I would say the profession is in a much better position in the sense that it cannot be consolidated to the degree some we're talking about. I am optimistic about my organization.
Is MB2 different? Dr. Chris Villanueva on DPOs, DSOs, and dentist autonomy. Part 2, a discussion with Dr. Bob D.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to get to the idealist personality is that I don't really care about money. I do. Okay. And if I say I don't, I'm not human. I do. But as doctors, patient care is the number one importance for me. Ethics and patient care. And there is this, I don't want to say misconception. I want to talk about there is this idea that corporate, private equity-backed organizations, again, we're going back to this because I want you to repeat it again. This is really important because that's important. That's why I'm talking to you. Private equity-backed organizations care about profit first, patient second. And what you're telling me is that's not how you guys look at it. Am I correct to assume that?
Yeah, absolutely not. So I think we discredit providers when we accuse them of putting profits first just because they work for a private equity group. Understand, these are professionals. We all went to school. We all have a code of ethics that we must abide by. We have to sleep with what we do on a day-to-day basis. So to imply that somehow some guy with an MBA is forcing providers to do things unethically, I would actually blame the provider. Say, get the heck out of there. What are you doing? That's within your right. So nothing in our profession happens without us acknowledging. So I don't want to act as though providers are victims in all this. No, we are in control, as we should be. And in my company, in our company, that's never been even a question. And so I've heard of overarching commentary about where inappropriate guidance could have been given to in other groups. And my response to that is, get the heck out of there, man. We control everything. This doesn't move without our two hands. So I don't like the idea that because it's private equity, ipso facto, the doctor's going to do unethical things. Like, never.
Again, maybe I wasn't clear enough. And I always say this because when people talk about overselling in a PPO model versus a fee-for-service model or private equity or private practice, and I'm like, if you have an unethical doctor, doesn't matter what model you put him in, they're
Correct.
unethical. You can't take an unethical PPO doc and not give him more money and make him ethical in a fee-for-service practice. It doesn't happen.
In the same term,
For DSOs.
if you're an ethical doctor,
yes.
no matter where you are, you're going to be an ethical doctor.
Yeah, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that you put so much pressure on these young doctors. We're getting 8,000 doctors coming out with 500,000 plus level of debt. Not you, I'm talking about in general, the society, is that now the lines can get blurred, number one. Number two, they keep moving and they keep leaving these offices. They don't last in bad offices, 12 to 18 months. You and I both know the data.
Sure.
So I'm not blaming the doctors. I don't want to talk about ethics based on business model because that doesn't exist.
Well,
You're either
well,
an ethical or not.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that doctors coming out today are very challenged and they're not set up for success. But what are you going to do about it? I'm a free market capitalist. Like, they don't have enough jobs in private practice to hire them. So if they did, I guarantee you the vast majority of those doctors would choose to work for private practitioners. We don't have that. So it always irks me when I see private practitioners opining on that cycle when they're not providing a solution. They're just complaining. And so what I would say is that I'm actually doing something about it. Like, I'm providing hopefully stable offices for, if those doctors decide to hire new grads, for them to mentor them, absorb them, and do what we as a profession have been doing for decades. That's a normal transition. And so I'm trying to provide an alternative to a cottage industry where private practitioners don't have the ability or access to maybe absorb as many of those new grads as possible, or working for a chain. And so I believe that the larger we get and the more stable our platform, the more stable the offices, the larger population base they can service, and hence hire those associates into traditional private practice models.
Yeah, again, we are doing something about it, hopefully, or through organized dentistry. We need to hold officials, deans, schools accountable. Why are you graduating so many doctors? What is the reason? Why are they graduating with 2 crowns? I don't think your organization wants a poorly trained doctor in your offices. I'm not saying every one of them are like that, but it has become a transactional process, this dental education, and that needs to change.
Sure.
Once it becomes education again, we can address a lot of issues. But for now, we have 8,000, we have 40% more doctors graduating, and they call it access to care, where none of them go to places we actually need dentists. Everybody sticks around the big cities. And you are right. If we do not have my friend Dr. Bloom called it the big business of dentistry, which you guys are. If we don't have them, what's going to happen to all these doctors? Where are they going to work? So see what your point is. But I want to stress again that doctors in your organization are making every decision. Clinical decisions are made by doctors, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's never been in question. And if now that you understand our origin story, you would understand that was never part of the discussion early on. It was always a facilitator of private practices.
Yeah. What do you do to protect the young dentists? Let's say you got probably 30, 40% are young dentists under 5 years?
You'd be surprised. Once again, our profile looks very similar to private practice. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of private practitioners are reluctant to hire associates who don't have 5 years worth of experience. So the vast majority of the doctors that my owners decide to hire are 5 years or more out of school. And that's not my decision. That's your decision as a private practitioner to make those decisions. It is their job to mentor them like you would in private practice. So I don't spend much time thinking about how to protect them. They don't need protection. My doctors are their mentors. Like, I've picked great partners, and I trust that they will mentor the doctors regardless of age that will treat their patients.
Yeah, I want to go on the record to say there are as many stories about bad private practice owners than DSOs and DPOs. It's not an epidemic for one class again. We as humans need to be treating our associates better. And that's the fact. That
absolutely. And I have to think there's so much fabricated division in our profession, whether it's the easy ones of like corporate versus private, or I've seen a surge of PPO dentists versus fee-for-service dentists. It's so silly. You know who we should be working against is, let's work together on trying to figure out this insurance piece or this advocacy piece on education. So much effort is wasted on ghosts that don't exist. I know there's a lot of commentary about DSOs. Let's just talk about DSOs in general. Lump my organization in there. We did a study last year and we counted every sponsor-backed group with more than 20 locations. Okay. So that's how I define a traditional corporate model. And we threw our offices in there, and we found, compared to the industry as a whole, it's only 12, 13%. 12 or 13%. And we're
Right.
spending 80% trying to accuse the other side of something that may or may not be true. It's not a big piece of our profession. And if you peel back the layers, you're like, we all went to school together. We all have the same, to your point, it doesn't matter where we work. We're either ethical or unethical. And so I would spend more time thinking through us as a profession, looking out for one another and making sure that we aren't being taken advantage of by vendors or insurance carriers or investors, than trying to make a nice clean line in the sand about corporate versus non-corporate, or PPO versus non-PPO, or specialist versus non-specialist. I think as a profession, we spend way too much time doing that.
So let's switch this last part of the interview. And I really appreciate you being here once again. MB2 and Chris have not paid me. This is not an advertising. This is...
You're really worried that people will think that you're going to get paid for it.
No, this is important, right? This is important because this is not a plug for your organization, but the whole thing is making you look really good. And I don't have a problem shining light on that. In other words, if you are allowing doctors to make patient care decisions, I don't have a problem with that. That's why I told you it's an enigma for me.
Yeah. So I want to rephrase that a little bit. I'm not allowing them to make those decisions. They're making those decisions. They're allowing me to be a guest in their house. It's not, it goes both ways. But yeah, I completely understand. And that's why I built this thing, right?
And it comes as a leadership. And what happens when you're gone, when you retire? What happens to this organization? I don't want you to predict, but that's, again, a question I have. But let's talk about this. This is really important for you. Why didn't you become a member of the ADSO? That's the Association of Dental Support Organizations, for those who don't know, that has every single DSO a member of it, except you guys.
To our earlier point, I didn't align with some of those groups. And I didn't want to be associated with some of those groups. And my mandate is not to them. My mandate is to my partners. And if it wasn't providing direct assistance or benefit to my partners, it didn't make sense. On top of that, it's very expensive. It's very expensive. And we already pay, a lot of it's already paid dues to the ADA. Many doctors are ADA members. And so it seems somewhat redundant. I understand there are some nuanced issues as you get older, as you get larger, I used to say, as a business. And we address that on our own. And so they just didn't, at the time, we look at it, didn't represent something that we wanted to invest in directly. They've could have grown. I can't opine on where they stand today, but that's the long and short of it. Right or wrong, I still view myself as a private practitioner, not as a private equity portfolio manager. I truly believe I look at myself as a private practitioner, and my partners are private practitioners.
What do you do? You wake up in the morning, what do you do?
What do I do? Come to work and I sit here and I take calls from my doctors. I travel a lot trying to talk to educate doctors about the organization. I host a lot of events here in Dallas, whatever the business needs of me. But a lot of what we do is very intentional. I like a very flat organization. I don't have an executive assistant. My doctors text me, DM me, call me. That's the way I like to run my business. To your point about what happens when I decide to quit, if I decide to quit, it's no different than all of us in our private practices. So back that up with, first of all, the good news is I'm not qualified to do anything else. I'm a dentist. This is all I know. It's not, I can be plucked from here and put into a podiatry roll-up or something. Like, this is it. This is my baby. I'm going to retire here. I love what I do. I owe it to my partners to stay. I was just in a discovery day earlier today, and I told them, one thing I could tell you is that if you join us, I'm going to be your partner for the rest of your career. I ain't going anywhere. I think I've earned that right to say that. We've now gone through 3 significant capital events in the last 7 years, which is unheard of.
Tell me about that. What people don't understand how that works. Okay. So tell me this recap that you guys had 3 of them. This is the education part that I wanted for you to tell me a little bit more.
This podcast is sponsored by Digapalooza, the continuing education event where clinical excellence meets community. Early bird tickets available now at dentistryingeneral.com.
I'll try to boil it down to something very simple. Whenever you have equity in your practice is valued at X, and when you have the same equity in a larger, more stable, more proven organization, it's exponentially larger. The valuation of the same dollar is more. And so our recap event is when that investment into the holding company is then monetized. They're able to take some money out of the business, which is greater than if they had left it in their private practice. I've created value for them by finding great partners, putting best practices in place, showing a historical track record for the organization's growth. Historically, we've done 30% growth year over year. It's impossible to do that in private practice for 17 years straight. So there is value to an investor just based on our performance. Forget the accusations about control and all that for a second, just from an investment standpoint.
Yeah, let's give an example. Can we do that? Let's say I have a practice doing 1.5. MB2 comes to me and I become a partner. You buy 60% of my practice. Typically, I don't want you to be exact, but 60% of my practice. Am I correct to assume that?
With a be possible, yeah.
Let's say my practice is valued at, I don't know, $1 million. Let's say for better numbering. I know you can say bigger or smaller, okay? And instead of you paying me $1 million to get rid of me, you will give me $600,000 for 60% of my practice, and I keep 40%. And from that $600,000, you give me $300,000 cash and $300,000 in stock of the bigger company, which is MB2. Am I correct in assuming that?
That structure is a potential outcome. It's not 30-30. It could be, we provide less stock because our stock is valuable. So I will be clear with your listeners, like, it's not normal to give that much stock. I mean, we value our stock. And so if you get stock in the company, yes, but you're right. If you get stock in the company, that stock will grow commensurate with the performance of the company.
Okay, so are you telling me that was an important part? Because there are people listening to this to finding out how MB2 is run. So you're telling me that your stock is so valuable now that you don't no longer do 50. At some point, you were doing probably 50-50 stock and cash, right?
It depends on the deal. Like if a very large deal and people really want stock, we can advocate for that. But understand, stock issuance in MB2 is a relatively new concept. Like we didn't issue stock. We started issuing stock in 2021, 2020, so only 3 or 4 years. Why? Because we valued our stock. And so how you got stock in the company is at a recap event, that 40% that you hold, you can sell 20% of that and elevate it to the company stock. That originally that was the only way to participate. And that was a fair way. It's okay, we'll give you cash. You can invest it in,
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Yeah, we all wish Bitcoin. But then ultimately you can get, but doctors wanted more stock. They said, okay, listen, I know the value now. Every time we recap, we tripled our investment. So if you put in $1 in 17, it turned into $3 in 21. And then last year, that $3 turned into $9. So it's a great investment with no management fees per se, like if you were putting it into a fund. So it's a very attractive vehicle. But yeah, that is the quid pro quo, is that you have access to a $4+ billion company growing at 30% a year. And we know all the players. You know the management, you know me, you know what I'm doing every day. You see the pipeline, you see the interest, you understand how this business grows, and you're living with your own 2 feet the fact that it's a zero compromise business. You have more time with your family. You make more money if you stay with it. I know there's going to be an analysis on the tax benefits of that, but you do make, we've analyzed it 10 ways so far, like you make more if you stick with it, you take less risk. And hopefully you're just a happier individual because you're surrounded by like-minded people who are invested in your business. And so it's a compelling value proposition that's worked over and over again. We are one of the few, if not the only, that's had 3 consecutive events where doctors are returned capital that they've invested. A lot of groups will say what they will, but they never get to do it. And so we're up against that. But the reality is, like, it's a privilege to invest in. There's normally minimums, there's normally management fees, but because you're part of the group, you get to participate directly. You get to see on a day. I just had my owners call 2 days ago, and they saw our numbers. They saw how we're performing as an organization, the pipeline, the inquiries of doctors asking to join. So you have a really good feeling about where this organization, and there's no competing model to us. Our competing model is, it's not these large groups. Our competing model is private practice. Private practice. And so if we could educate private practitioners that, hey, come on in, the water's warm. It's not, no one's going to tell you what to do. And you get more time with your family. You make more money and you take less risk. it's normally a relatively easy.
So what happens to that 1 million that you owe me? If you were a private practice, wants me out of my practice, you give me $1 million, I go retire. Now, what happens to that 1 million? What does the MB2 do to it? Retire. I'm sorry. I've come to you and we've decided that we're going to be a good fit. And the practice was valued as $1 million. What
Sure.
do you give me as a seller? What happens to the seller?
So you're talking, if we buy 60%, yeah, a portion of that 60% will be cash, a portion of that will be stock, and a lot of it is driven by your preference. I've had doctors that say, hey, I don't need cash. I love the company. I want all stock, and we arm wrestle, and I'll give them somewhere in between to invest. But that's a very personal decision. I will tell you though, every time we've recapped, the last 2 times we recapped, we've put the offer out for doctors to put additional funds into the company because that's their time to reinvest. Every single time we've been oversubscribed. In 2021, we got to a point where we would be above a certain threshold that the private equity guys said, no, we can't take any more money because our doctors were so bullish about our growth and our future and the leadership. And so I want to impress upon your viewers that we're not, other groups may be giving stock because they don't want to give cash. If you get stock in the company, it's because you want it. If you want the stock in the company. Now, larger practices, yeah, there may be some economic reason to give more stock. I'm not going to say there's never, but by and large, that's a relatively new concept for us. And we're trying to navigate it and try to be fair because 3 years ago, all these guys came out of COVID and they were like, oh, your stock's gonna be worth $1 gajillion. And doctors are talking to this group or coming to us like, we want stock. And I'm like, we don't give stock. You have to buy that every time you recap. And so we've modified our approach in response to these other groups making these empty promises. And now that these empty promises are proving to be empty, people are like, oh, now stock's worthless. I'm like, no, let's be very clear. Like, our stock was always valuable. It's historically been valuable. I've been doing this for 17 years. I've been doing this longer than anyone else that you've spoken to. And I've been here with my executive team, exact same executive team all this time. So I can tell you what's going to happen. The certainty that you have that you're going to be going to work on Mondays, the certainty I have that we're going to have another event because that's what I do. And so I think it's a very different approach than what you would find in other groups.
My concern is you told me that you are very selective with the private equity companies that you deal with. Okay. But this last time, everybody knows in the news, KKR, which has invested in the largest DSO, Heartland Dental, and now I guess it owns 10% of Henry Schein. What is the relationship with KKR? Are they the private equity that is part of your investment?
They have invested in the organization, but it's such a small position where they have not even observation rights. We have private equity groups that are on the board. I have a private equity group that has observation rights because they invested enough. And we have those that they're just happy to have given the privilege to invest. That's where they.
I see. So they're not involved. And once again, private equity does not make clinical decisions in MB2. I keep bringing that up because I know I'm going to hear from my friends about this. But
listen, I understand the concern. And if I heard 10 stories about them making decisions and one of that about them not making the decision, like I'd be suspect too. But like I said, give some grace, talk to doctors within our group outside of me and just ask them if there've ever been any of that. Truth of the matter is, I'd like to hope doctors would leave if that was the case. And that's within my organization or outside my organization. My hope is that we've worked too hard for our licenses. I believe that we are truly trying to service our communities in good light, and financials and all that comes secondary. And so if that is ever compromised, I would hope that the doctors would have the intestinal fortitude to leave. I think that will leave our profession in a better place. And so my directive to my doctors is if that ever happens, you tell me and I'll make it right. I've yet to hear it.
Has any doctor ever wanted to buy his practice back?
I mean, that not have they told me. I think we had a couple of retirements. We had one guy that made some pretty bad life decisions and we had to separate, but if that was the case, I'd let him buy it back. I'm not sweating those things, man. I think life is too short. And so I think that's what you'll find when talking to my doctors. whether I've talked to him last week or 5 years ago, we're all buddies. And I think we all value a profession that's given us so much. So if there was ever any difficulties in our partnership, I would have a problem.
I'm getting the vibe that you are running everyday operation at MB2.
Me?
Uh-huh.
No, I'm sitting at this desk.
I know, but major
but
decisions, you're still very much involved in MB2.
I mean, that's your job as a CEO. You said, yeah, I'm the founder, but I'm still the CEO. I'm very involved on a day-to-day and a strategic level. I'm deciding where the direction of the company, but also most importantly, protecting the interests of my partners. I think that's the most important job of any CEO. And so you have to decide, is your CEO protecting the private equity guy's investment? Most, I'll give it to you, like most private equity portfolios place the leadership team. And so that leadership team is indebted to the private equity guys. My loyalties are not with my private equity guys. My loyalties are with my partners. I want to be very clear about it. And they know that. And I make no apology for it. And so it's a very different structure. Believe it's a vocation for me. And yeah, I make those decisions at the global level, and my doctors make them at the local level. And that's why I say at MB2, the doctors make the decisions.
Yeah. So last question here. And I want to tell everybody how you and I connected. We connected, I think, a couple of years ago when you came to my group and there were some discussions, but Chris actually reached out and was intrigued by my advocacy for our profession and wanted to see what we could do together to help each other as far as advocacy goes. What I want to ask you is two things. Number one, how can we work together to help the advocacy? And number two, where do you see our future going? Where is dentistry going? People are talking about, oh, the DSOs are taking over. And I'm definitely distinguishing here between a DSO and a DPO. Okay. I'm still going to analyze a lot of this interview and see what you just told me, which is very intriguing. And your partners should be proud of this interview because it clears a lot of ambiguities about this practice model. But tell me what you think as far as advocacy and the future of dentistry goes.
Yeah. I think I first met you because some of my partners pointed out that you're making fun of some of our flyers. I'm like, fair enough. He doesn't like our flyers.
Did I? What was the flyer?
Yeah, you posted a flyer. You're like, this is terrible. I'm like, I didn't make it, but we hired people to make it. I'm like, what do you want from me?
Was it terrible?
I don't know. I'm sure if you send flyers out and the next thing you know, someone's calling your baby ugly, you'd probably take it personal too.
I'm sorry. I don't remember.
It's fine. I just thought it was funny. I'm like, that was just more of a commentary. Like, I always think about that. It's like, how would you like it if you put something out there, it's trying to get new patients, the patient, this is not a nameless company. This is my baby. This is my private practice. That's how I feel it. But I want to digress. I will say that it intrigued me that you were so passionate about certain issues that I, quite candidly, don't see it. I don't. And when I see a dentist care about something, I want to understand the ins and outs of it. And if there's something that we can align to, or something I can educate them on and the way I see the world from a different vantage point, I'm always open to it. And so that's why I reached out. And I think to answer your question, how can I help each other? I'd follow my peers' leads because you spend more time in that space than I do. My focus is on my partners. And if your focus is on policy, you're the subject matter expert. And I would love to hear your position and I will challenge it. Like you said about the credentialing piece and how it's bad for private practitioners, but good for DSOs. I would say DSOs are such a small factor in the big picture of our profession. We have such bigger issues to deal with, even if you're right. I'm not saying you are, but even if you were, I don't think that's where we should spend I think we should spend our energy on protecting our profession and our independence from other entities. But I think that's a piece of it that I would rely heavily on you. On the piece about where the profession's heading, don't let anyone fear-monger you. DSOs, they're not taking over. This is such a nuanced business. There's a reason why we haven't been consolidated already. There's a reason why, more than half of optometrists are consolidated because that's a more predictable profession. We always joke in school about how you give 10 dentists a patient, you'll get 12 different treatment plans, right? There's no way you can institutionalize our expertise to that degree. You have to rely on the individual provider. And what I found is if I invest in the provider, not the intersection or the traffic counts or the competitive data, if I invest in the provider, I have a more predictable outcome than if I invested in the market. And so that's why I do these affiliations as opposed to de novos. I still do some de novos for the doctors I already know. But I would say the profession is in a much better position in the sense that it cannot be consolidated to the degree some we're talking about. I am optimistic about my organization. I do believe in what I said about it being a non-compromised opportunity. And I think if and when we are scaled to the point where the financials are so blatantly obvious and the benefits are so blatantly obvious to a private practitioner, we will capture tremendous market share. And I hope that if we represent 5 or 10% of the industry, that's tens of thousands of practices. That's a long way to go. And you said yourself, we're the 4th largest, maybe in store count, not by profit. I guarantee you that. We're much larger. But in terms of store count, and we're 800, there's tremendous opportunity for a model that solves a lot of the problems that we all voice as private practitioners. And that's my hope, is that we end up in a space where we are servicing more private practitioners. It becomes more commonplace, and the bad actors are no longer relevant because their financial models don't even compete with the benefits of a private practice model within our network.
Yeah, I want to agree with you there that I always say this and people get mad at me that we're a lot more like hairstylists than doctors because people travel for their hairstylists. I know a little bit thing or two about hair, but
you didn't travel.
But you see what I'm saying? In other words, dentistry is still not as expensive as medicine that we are forced to go see people. Dentistry, we are drilling in people's head. So do not be afraid of DSOs. Private practice model is here to stay. And this interview opens my eyes and hopefully a lot of people's eyes that there are different models out there. Some good, some may not. I don't know. Hey, I want to thank you for being here. Do you have anything to add at the end?
No, I really appreciate it. And I'm glad we had this conversation. Some of my colleagues told me I'd be entering hostile territory, but you've been very gracious. So I appreciate the time. I would extend this invitation to anyone to come and visit us. I think seeing, touching, talking to the people here in Dallas always has a large impact on the way people view our group and or dentistry as a general. And no pressure on us, even if you want to come to learn how to start your own group. I'm a huge advocate of dentists succeeding, whether it's through us, starting their own group, or joining our affiliation program, Carabelli Club. I think that's a great opportunity.
Great.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much for being here, and hopefully we can meet at some point.
Come on down.
Thank
All
you.
right, bud. Thanks.
This podcast is sponsored by DIGapalooza, the continuing education event where clinical excellence meets community. Early bird tickets available now at dentistryingeneral.com.
This has been a production of Dentistry in General Radio Network. Visit our website, dentistryingeneral.com, to join engaging clinical and business conversations, explore our dental podcasts, and stay updated on our upcoming live events.